What are the crucial skills that you've seen hold people back from being able to make that leap?
Relationship building. I think early on in our careers, we deliver, they evaluate. We deliver, we get evaluated. We did a good job. There's a point in time where it becomes a seat at the table. And that table is basically dinner, right?
Yeah.
I have to feel comfortable that I can share whatever I need to share at that table.
Yeah.
If I'm not comfortable sharing with you at that table, you'll never be invited to that table. I don't care how good you are in that seat. You'll never be invited over for dinner.
Hey folks, welcome to Executive Runtime. Here, we speak with highly accomplished executives to hear about their stories, lessons learned, and frameworks used to reach the highest levels of leadership and success. I'm your host, Johnny Austin. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. It's a privilege to welcome Troy Dennis, Head of Digital Transformation for North America at Mastercard. Troy brings over 2 decades of experience in fintech innovation, payment strategy, and product leadership across some of the most influential financial institutions in North America. Currently at Mastercard, Troy is leading digital transformation initiatives focused on growing the company's core payments business through strategic planning, process optimization, and fintech acceleration. Previously at Mastercard, he served as SVP and Head of Product Acceptance and Fintech for North America. At Regions Bank, he was Head of Unsecured Product and Merchant Services. At TD Bank, he simultaneously led as U.S. Head of Card Operations Service and Payment Products, and as U.S. Head of Product and Acquisition, where he developed branded credit card products. His impressive career also includes time at U.S. Bank as Head of Product and Strategic Acquisition, where he led new product development teams for various market segments, and at JP Morgan Chase, where he was responsible for affluent acquisition strategies and played a key role in launching Chase Sapphire across all channels. Troy's blend of strategic vision, product innovation, and customer relationship management expertise offers valuable insights for aspiring executives, particularly in how he's navigated digital transformations across traditional financial institutions and emerging fintech ecosystems. Please welcome Troy Dennis to the show. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Well, glad to be here.
Where are you from again?
I am originally from Delaware, Pennsylvania, right on the Delaware-Pennsylvania line. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, but all my professional career, I worked in Wilmington, Delaware.
Got it. And you went to Hampton, right?
I went to Hampton University. I'm a Hampton University alumni. Proud Hampton University alumni.
Okay. How'd you end up at Hampton?
I went up to Hampton University. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, a place called Media Wallingford. Went to Wallingford Swarthmore School District, which was a predominantly Caucasian school district. Probably one of the best school districts in the state. And so just growing up in that school district, knew I wanted to go to college. Wasn't sure what college I wanted to go to. Wasn't sure what major I actually wanted to go after. But early on where we live at, there's a few HBCUs in the area, like Cheney University, Lincoln University. Spent some time in my high school days visiting those schools. Probably too early to be going up there to those colleges, but was up there, on some Fridays at the basketball games. And I said, I think this is the environment I want to grow in. And then I had a cousin that went to Hampton University and kind of went down there, followed his footsteps. And we spent a lot of time in Hampton. My father spent some time growing up in Hampton Roads. And so I knew the community a little bit. So it was a familiar place for me. So it all matched.
Would you say there was any sort of culture shock or shift that you experienced transitioning from where you grew up to Hampton?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you asked me that, John. So growing up in the North and then going to school, I would say Virginia's the South. I would say I was exposed to successful people in my high school arena. But I wasn't exposed to the number of successful African-American individuals, people who come from families that were, second generation Hamptonians, And it was eye opening because where I lived, the African Americans in the area, you had some of them went to college. A lot of it was blue collar. My father was a worked in the automotive industry at Chrysler.
Hmm.
Um, my mother worked for the state. And so it was rare for us to be interacting with so many people, so many individuals, their fathers were doctors, their grandfather was a doctor. I was like, oh, really? Okay. So it kind of
Hmm.
opened your eye up to kind of see the gamut of people that look like you.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I
kind of
think that was
widened that
probably the most
aperture.
eye opening experience that I've had. What did you say, John?
Yeah. No, I was gonna say it just kind of widened your aperture a little bit of, I guess, what was possible and what was out there.
Possible.
Yeah.
Like you really didn't know what was possible. And then growing up where I had a friend and they were African American and like their father was a successful banker. And I was like, okay, but he was like the only successful banker I knew in corporate America.
Hmm.
But it did open me up. Okay, wow, this is not, rare. Like there's a lot of things.
Yeah. You had a pretty extensive and successful career in finance up to this point, starting off at B of A. And I know you're at Mastercard now. I'm curious, when did you know you wanted to go into the finance industry? Was this intentional? Was this, something you stumbled into? I'm just curious on what that journey was.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey. So I went to Hampton University. I was a science major. I graduated really without a detailed plan on what I wanted to do. And,
Hmm.
I was unsure of what I was really good at, was unsure about what I was passionate at. And I had a really good friend in high school and their father I told you their father worked in banking, right? Their father worked
Yeah.
at a place called MBNA America, which was the largest employer in Delaware, was one of the foundational companies of co-brand marketing and affinity cards, like your college card. It was founded in Wilmington, Delaware. He had worked there for many, many years. And, he was like, you should get a job there. And I was like, okay. And so, me young, and I was working part time. I was graduating. I was trying to really figure it out. And
Hmm.
I started working there, and it was in financial services and credit cards. And MBNA was interesting. It was always, they had this mission was think of yourself first as a customer. Um, it was founder led, and they really brought uh, students and college graduates in, but
Hmm.
had you come in from the ground up. Like you were literally on the telephones, answering phones for like a year. And then you would do credit underwriting for a year. And then you would and then you might get into kind of a staff role where you do marketing and stuff like that you went to school for. And so at first, I was like, I went to college. Why would I want to I don't want to answer phones. I'm only going to do this job for 3 months. And it'll get me a new job that I went to college for. My parents paid for Hampton University, so I can go do something really exciting. That went on for about 6 years, right? MDNA was a great company. And I quickly transitioned from the call centers to the credit division to doing analytical work on credit card businesses and event marketing. And I just learned so much, right? Because it
Hmm.
was a training ground. And I didn't realize it then, but I was like, it was really setting me up for my foundation of who I was going to become in the financial service world.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a really strong foundation because if you think about that, others that graduate from school outside of Delaware who didn't go to MBNA, like some of them start right in staff positions, right? They start right in line, they do marketing, they're
Yep.
marketing people, they do marketing. But the challenge is like they don't really understand the business, right? And I understood, I understand P&Ls, I understand call center, I understand answering the phones, why customers are important, listening to calls. How does that impact product strategy? How does that impact your underwriting strategy? So I had a really broad, good foundation, right? It's almost like that pyramid, right? I had a really strong foundation because it was broad in terms of the
Hmm.
foundation. And in MBNA, I attribute that being very intentional about that as they built leaders up in the organization. And so that
Yeah.
was extremely critical in my.
What would you say to people who are currently graduating and going into those staff roles, and they don't have the experiences that you have, but they want to get that same wisdom? How are they to approach that now? How do they go about recouping that knowledge that they missed by not having going through the quote unquote paying your dues portion of their career, similar to what you went through?
Yeah, I would tell, it's funny. I do mentors, officially and unofficially mentoring young people in their professional career. And I would say this, I'll use the pyramid approach again, right? The foundation, like your career is not always straight, right? And
Yeah.
mine for sure definitely isn't, right? Your career, and I think sometimes you come out of school and you think it's a ladder and it's one step and the other, right? And you
Hmm.
think about that ladder, right? And if you ever climbed the ladder, right? It's a little shaky, right? It's a little shaky.
Yeah.
And you want your career to be almost like the pyramid. I'll use the pyramid analogy again, right? Because your foundation is broad. And so when you go up the pyramid, it's going to get narrow because your competition is going to be more narrow. You're going to be higher up, but you're really stable, right? The pyramid is extremely stable because the foundation is broad. So my advice would be, in your career, make sure your experiences are broad. You
Hmm.
don't focus so much on, am I going to be the director? Am I going to be vice president? Am I going to be executive vice president? Am I going to be the chair? Like, don't focus on that. That might be your goal to get there, but make sure your reach is broad when you're young in your career, so you have a really strong foundation and understanding of the business. And then that will shape who you want to be when you climb up the ladder.
Yeah.
Because the higher you go, the less opportunities you will have to broaden your scope, right? For example,
Yep.
if you're leading division and you go, oh, I want to run the call center. Someone's going to say, well, why would I have you as the head of the call center? And you have no ever have call center. That's just
Hmm.
hypothetical. Like, so just think about that. And you want to, so think about early in your career, you're really just adding more tools to your toolkit and add as many tools into your toolkit as possible. Don't worry so much about, okay, the next promotion. What's the next promotion? Worry about the next experience. What's the next skill set I can add to my tool?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned mentoring. Um, how do people go about actually securing mentors at your level or even above? Just speaking from, drawing from my own experience early in my career, I started off at Lockheed Martin. This company was huge. And so it was inconceivable that I could actually engage with anyone who is more than, a couple years ahead of me in my career. How does one actually, broach that conversation and start to engage folks like yourself?
Yeah, it's funny, early on in my career, I've always had mentors. I had the ability to have mentors. Some were sponsors and some were advocates, and I'll explain that a little
Hmm.
bit more. Didn't know really what they were, that they were all those things. But I think in your career, you need all three, right? You need a mentor, you need a sponsor, and you need an advocate. Your question is, how do you go about that? So I would say, like I worked at a big company, MBA, I told you, it was one of the largest companies and employers in Delaware. I went
Hmm.
to Bank One Chase, and you know how big Bank One and Bank of America, and I mean, you know how big Chase is, right? It's huge. What I quickly learned, I had I had an African American mentor, very senior executive at MBNA, and she said, reach out. No one reaches out to say, hi, could I spend time with you?
Hmm.
Because they're just like what you just said. They're just big company. No one wants to know. They don't want to speak to me. They don't want to. They don't want to speak to me. The reality is they do. They actually do. They would much rather speak to you for 15 minutes about their career because you're probably the most easiest meeting they're going to have in a week. Right. And it's not going to be like, think about it, right? It's not going to be about a P&L. It's not going to be about a business issue. It's not going to be about an issue. It's not going to be about a roadblock. It's really just sitting down, having a conversation with you about your career, what you want to do, how to navigate, learning from them. So that's number one. I think that's the biggest myth. And I found that now, not everyone, but very, very few times in all the organizations I reached out that I've worked in, that I have reached out to someone 2 to 3 levels ahead and said, hey, can I get 10 minutes on your calendar? and they have said no.
Mm.
Very, very, very rarely have I. There's going to be one times that, the meeting might move, right? I'm not going to say, oh, they're meeting with you next week. They might meet with you a month later. The meeting may move, but I would always encourage you. I will always encourage the people I mentor to do that and make sure you're being intentional about scheduling those meetings. And they're not about you looking for a new role. It's about you learning how to navigate the organization or career advice. And some of those relationships will soon develop into mentors. They all will not, because you have to have a natural vibe, a connection, right? Everyone's human, right? So you got to have a natural connection. So when they say, Johnny, I like you. Can you get back on my calendar? That's a good idea. Let's think about this. Or they may say, I want you to meet John or Mary over in this department, and they'll send the email to make that connection.
Yeah.
Let me send. So when that starts happening, then you want to circle back and say, hey, I met with Mary. I met with John over in that department. This is what I learned. That was interesting. And so then you start cultivating that relationship, but it's on you. It's on the mentee to cultivate the relationship. A lot of times I think we go into these organizations and they have these mentor groups, right? And you think you go in and you get the mentor group. They work sometimes, but most times it's those one-on-one meetings that you schedule, and you cultivate those relationships. And they become mentors. And eventually, some of the people you may meet might become advocates. An advocate is a mentor is a person who, you can bounce ideas off of, right? They come and go. Advocate's a person who's like in the room when you're not there. And we all know there's rooms that we're not there.
Yep.
Right. And it has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It's just rooms that they're talking about talent. That may be 2 levels up that you're not there. And the advocate's in the room for you and say, I know Johnny. Johnny talked to me a few weeks ago, and I know he wants to do this. This might be an opportunity. Right. So he's advocating for you in rooms that you're not there. So you always want that. Right. And then a sponsorship, it may be someone that's more senior than the advocate to be like, I'm Johnny sponsoring this organization. I brought him on. I brought him in, and they can really move things along. And so building on those relationships, and both of those are about those rooms that you're not normally in, because they're higher level. They're making decisions. They're looking at talent. They understand the higher level objectives of the organization that may not have been shared with everyone. And they can help advocate and sponsor your name where those places feel free. So they're the 3. All 3 of them are critical, and they all serve a distinct purpose. And the more you get in your career, you'll notice, okay, there's an advocate and there's a sponsor. In the back of your head, you know how to deal with it.
You said something earlier I want to revisit a little bit and dig into. You talked about how most people think of their career as a ladder, but it's actually a bit more shaky than that. I'm curious if you had experiences where you first realized this. Maybe you had to take a lateral role or a lateral move, or, maybe you experienced title deflation or something like that. But when did it occur to you that, oh, this is not, a straight up upward trajectory? I'm going to have to make some zigs and some zags here before I actually get to where I want to be.
I, as an African-American male, I think we learned early on that is not going to be a straight line for us, right? It's not going to be, and I actually learned it, and I didn't realize that's what was happening. The challenge is like realizing your maturity. You begin to realize, okay, this is what I need to do to get here. I mean, I learned early on in my career that that's the path that I had to take. I didn't like it right early in my career. And some job movements were because I was unhappy with that zigzag. Like, I know when I look back over my life, when I look back over my life, like I looked at the decisions, I was like, why did I really make that decision to leave that company? Why did was it that I was unfulfilled the company, or was it that I wasn't mature enough to understand that my career wasn't a straight? And I would say, honestly, I wasn't mature enough to say that it's okay that my career is not a straight line. It's okay that I'm stagnant and I need to learn another skill set. And that's okay. But I was impatient, and I really wasn't ready to accept that. And so some career moves, some job, organization change, was driven by it. I didn't realize, I was a little immature at the time to realize, okay, that's what's happening and not seeing the full picture. Um, and so I made those decisions, but I would encourage everyone to really think about those decisions because it can be frustrating. It's extremely frustrating when you know that you want to go A to B to C and you realize you got to go A, B, C, back to B, and then to C. And then you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And wasting my time. And then that can create a frustration. I will tell you the biggest thing I've learned over the last 10 years is don't compare yourself. It's your journey. And it's your journey. And what's successful to you is for you, but what's successful for someone else is for someone else. And so don't ever compare. And I think that's really, really hard for young professionals today because we have all these cool things. We got LinkedIn, Instagram, and you start to see promotions. So-and-so gets a new job and I guarantee you when you start to see this person gets a new job or get the company, you start to look, am I in the right job? Why are they getting this job? I don't have this job. And then you start looking for a job. And so try not to do that, right? It's easy to say, it's easy said than done because you're on your own journey. And don't ever let that distract your path and your path to success. Don't forget why you're at the company you're in. Don't forget, you're always constantly learning and thriving. And I would say value the organization that you're in. And do you feel good? Do you feel heard? Do you feel supported? Those things are so important. I think when you're young, you don't realize I'm getting another $10,000 or I'm getting another $20,000. But if you don't feel heard and you don't feel supported, that $20,000, like by the 90 days, you're going to be like, and I'm sure you've been there if you changed jobs, Johnny, you're going to be like, I got more money, but I'm not heard. I'm not supported. Because I made this move based on money. And so just that would be my kind of.
Yeah. Not to mention by the time the tax man gets done with you, you probably won't even feel that 10 to 20.
You won't even feel it. Like you won't even feel it. Like your happiness is priceless. My new saying it to myself is you want to be in a place where you are celebrated, not tolerated.
When people are evaluating these zigs and these zags, what type of things should they be considering, right? When is it time to make a move versus not? Like what are the most important factors people should be considering?
So I think you always have to evaluate the organization. How are they treating you? What's your brand in the organization? And your brand is like how people perceive you. Make sure you understand. It's really important that you understand that because sometimes we have blinders on our own brand, right? We think we're perceived one way and you're perceived another way. And you're like, okay, didn't realize that. So I would say, make sure you understand that. I would say, make sure that when you're evaluating the zig and the zags, that am I really growing and what new skills am I picking up from this zig or zag? Now there's some that's like, okay, I'm not really learning anything new in this. Then you start to evaluate, okay, am I in the right organization? Am I in the right company to help get me where I need to be? And I would say always have a 3 to 4 year plan, maybe probably a 5-year plan. And I would say, write that out and then, say, okay, if you want to be, I'm in product. If you want to be the chief product officer at the company, spend some time understanding what that person really does and what skills they have. And then you start to evaluate, okay, what skills am I lacking on a piece of paper? If it's data, if it's analytics, okay, am I lacking that? Do I want to learn that or do I want to hire for that? And so then you think about those skills, and then that will help you evaluate the zig and the zag. Is it beneficial to those key things that a chief product officer needs to have to be successful in that role? If it is, then you're not. If it's not, then you're like, I'm not going to waste my time. I'll give you a real life example. Someone, not, I know finance, I can read the P&L, but you
Mhm.
ask me to build a P&L from scratch. That's not what I want to do. So like, oh, you should go to finance. Why would I spend 7 months learning how to build in finance, building a P&L when I'd be much better understanding customer segmentation and pricing and marketing and all those other things. So just evaluate those type of things. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer of do what you do well, keep doing that better. A lot of times people go, oh, I'm learning something I'm not that good at. Mm, that's probably not, you could probably get okay at that. It's like, I don't play basketball. But like if I went out and practiced basketball every day, I'd probably might be okay, but I'd never be great. It's like, why waste all that time doing that when I could be, playing soccer, which I was pretty good at. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like, think about it that way.
That resonates a lot with me, really leaning into your strengths, because those are the things that people are going to notice you for and hire you for. And they're not going to say, oh, Troy's okay at X, so I'm going to hire him to do X. Like, that's not a thing that happens.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You always want to, I'm a firm believer, work in your strengths. So you asked me about evaluating roles. Like if it's not your strength, then you're like, okay, how long am I going to be here? But always try to work in your strengths because that's what people are going to recognize you as, right?
Yep.
I'm a
Yep.
change agent. Like my personal strength is I'm a change agent. I like to go in, I like to fix things. I like them, understand, okay, why we make decisions, like how do we change this? That's my thing. I like that work, developing and building new products, marketing efforts, driving results, but being a change agent in that, not just the status quo.
Mhm.
So that's my excitement. And so when I look for things, I make sure that that's the work I want to be. When I'm
Yep.
not doing that work, I'm like, okay, how much of this role is not that? If it
Mhm.
becomes 90% not, you're always got roles that aren't everything. There's
Yep.
90% the stuff I don't like to do, and 10% the stuff I love to do. I'm probably in the wrong.
Yeah. You said, you mentioned earlier, you know, uh, understanding your personal brand within a company, or at least what your perception is. I'm curious on, how do you think about getting ground truth on that? Because that can be super tricky. You can have a perception of your personal brand within a company of one thing and be acting based on that, but it's completely different in the heads of other people. How do you get ground truth? I guess you could just ask people, but how do you deal with situations where people aren't necessarily authentic with you? Or I'm curious on your thoughts.
It's a tricky one. It is hard. It is very hard, right? I would say solicit feedback. A lot of times companies have this 360 review. Don't take it personal. Just read it and read
Yeah.
into it and be like, okay, that's their perception of me. And take one or two nuggets that you want to change out of that. If they don't have a 360 review, then I would say try to solicit feedback um, from your teammates on just say, hey, I just had this meeting. Was there a way I could have communicated that better? Right.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get better at X. Be open to where you think your blind spots are. And you may say, okay, why would I want to do that? Like, just be selective and be like open, like, hey, for some reason, I don't think that landed well. What advice would you give me? You were in that meeting. Like, how could I have done a better job at that? So I want to try to improve that piece because it didn't land well. That'd be feedback you're taking because they're going to tell you about that, but that's really how they're starting to see you. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's what you think. Um, and so start playing that back and then keep taking those nuggets, but don't take it personal. Is their perception. Some people have natural biases, right?
Mhm.
People have natural biases. And so don't ever forget that there's some natural biases out there. You have to weigh those out. But that's the way I have taken it. Sometimes I take it first. Sometimes I tell you don't take it first. But sometimes you take that feedback first. You're like, oh, what is this? What did you say? Try not to take it personal. Try not to take it personal. Because you take it personal, you won't grow from it. I had some moments where I had some moments that I wasn't growing from it. But you want to try to grow from it. The goal is it's for you to grow from it and don't take it personal.
Yeah. Folks who are relatively successful, right? They've kind of worked early on in their career. They've gotten to that senior manager, maybe even a director role, but they've kind of plateaued a little bit and they want to get to that next level, right? They want to get to VP, senior VP, C level. What are the crucial skills that you've seen hold people back from being able to make that leap?
Relationship building.
That was fast.
Relationship building. It's all about relationship because at that level, I think early on in our careers, we deliver, they evaluate. We deliver, we get evaluated. We did a good job, we get a good job. There's a point in time where it becomes a seat at the table. And it's like, do they want to work with Johnny? Do I trust Johnny to have Johnny over dinner? Because that table is basically dinner, right?
Yeah.
I have to feel comfortable that I can share whatever I need to share at that table.
Yeah.
If I'm uncomfortable with sharing with you at that table, you'll never be invited to that table. I don't care how good you are in that seat. You'll never be invited over for dinner, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's about a relationship. I think at certain levels, at that level, it becomes less about what you do because there's tons of people that can do the job well. People do great work. There's a lot of high performers.
Yep.
The high performer that also builds relationships is that one that gets the next. Nine, most of the time. If you look at them, you're like, okay, who was his relationship with? Oh, he had an advocate. Oh, he had a relationship with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he has a relationship with this one. Oh, he took on an extra assignment outside of his everyday work because his sponsor needed something done.
Yeah.
It's those little things like that because you're building a relationship makes a huge difference in kind of where you are in your career. And a lot of people say, hey, I'm not getting promoted, but I did all this stuff. Look, I'm there. I'm like, you need to build more relationships.
Yep. I'm curious on mistakes, right? Specifically, not necessarily your mistakes, but what are the one or two mistakes that you are grateful you didn't have to experience on your own? Something you learned from watching someone else and you immediately incorporated that into your professional experience. And you've since looked back and said, oh, I'm really glad I didn't do X, Y, Z, because that would have been a big mistake.
In terms of job moves or just manage or just
In any of the above.
I would say how you deal with people, not valuing your peers up and down. They're estimating the importance of being likable. I think often people underestimate likable is important. I had a mentor and she told me, your job is to create fans every day. How many fans have you created? And I was like, oh my God, we all making fans. And she was like, you can still be tough, but you have to be likable and you have to create fans up, down, across the organization. When people say Johnny, when people say Troy, you want them to have positive things to say about it.
Yeah.
Although they may not like everything you do, they want to have positive things. You want them to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to feel good. So even if you have to have a rough conversation, you want to ensure that the person feels good and there's a way that you deliver it. And did I always do it well? No, I didn't. Have I learned from my mistakes? Yes, I have. Because it's critical. And I didn't realize how important that piece was early on in my career. And then I had a few side steps, right? Even later on in my career around, okay. Because of being a change agent, you want to move fast. You're like, okay, I want to move fast. And so, but the importance of making sure that everyone feels good and feels like they are heard.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to adjust your communication style based on the audience. And so it's really important you to understand that, I think, for individuals, because when you think about it, like hypothetically, for example, if I'm speaking to, I worked in one of the banks, I had a lot of interaction with the retail branch network.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're frontline employees. I talk to them completely different than you would talk to someone who's in corporate headquarters, in the office,
Yeah.
grinding out, we're doing PowerPoints all day, right? The front line, you gotta talk to them in their language and make sure that you're understanding what they heard, and don't make them feel like their questions don't make sense. Value their questions, understand asking them questions for clarification, even if you don't. But that's really, really important because you want to instill trust. You want to instill trust in the people you're talking to. And once you instill trust, then you instill likability.
You've occupied an interesting time and space over your career. I don't want to date you or anything, but you've been through, as best as I can tell, the dot-com bubble, the housing crisis, ZIRP, 0% interest stuff, COVID. And I'm sure throughout at least a lot of that, you've been in leadership positions. What's it been like to lead through those real world impactful events that affect your industry directly, and how do you navigate those troubled waters?
You're right. I never thought about it like that, John. You make me date myself. I have to do a lot. Interesting. How do you navigate through those waters? I would say you learn to pivot quickly, understand what's happening in the organization, understanding what's happening in the world and the impact it's going to have on your particular line of businesses. I happen to be in financial services. I happen to be in credit. And so, the housing market hit, right, in 2007, 2008. Like although I told you I didn't like data analytics, remember I said my background was in credit. Like I had to pull out like that background and say, listen, why we have all these 0% out here? Because people aren't paying us back. Like we had to start looking and reshaping and really pulling the onion back on our underwriting strategy, because it was people that were losing everything that the score would have missed, right? Because they were like going from 0 for 100 in like a day. Like you're like, the scores were just missing it all.
Yeah.
And so that type of stuff was interesting, but you have to learn kind of pivot and really spend some time on pivoting fast, but readjusting what your organization needs from you at that moment. At that moment, you have opportunity to still shine. At that moment, you have opportunity to pull on skills and take on additional assignments that are meaningful to the organization. At that moment, you have the time, because you come from, we all have diverse backgrounds, whether you're Black or whatever your nationality is. Pull on those diverse experiences because they all matter during those times, because we all have unique experiences.
Yeah.
And so learn to pull on all of that stuff during those times, because that makes you a better and a stronger leader.
Yeah. What the heck is executive president?
Uh-oh. What is you hate that? Don't you hate that when people say you don't have an executive president?
Well, I mean, it's so nebulous, right? And people have different definitions of it. I've just come around to the belief that it's one of those things, it when you see it, right? And everyone has a slightly different flavor of it, I guess. But I'm just curious on your take on it.
It's a word I hate. People use it. I really wish we didn't use it, but we do, right? They don't have executive presence. I think that's your ability to control the room. It's the ability for you to show confidence. Even though you don't know all that, you may not know all the information, but you have to show confidence.
Yeah.
They're the people who have executive specials. You're able to present and tell a story, not just pull the deck together, but you're able to articulate this story in a way that is compelling, that draws in the audience to what you're trying to convey, and you're able to deliver your message in a really distinct fashion. You talk about your key points, you talk about whatever it is, right? You spend time practicing your delivery of it. And it's not, you don't seem like you're reading from a script, like it's naturally coming about. I think when you do that, you start to command the room, you control the audience, and you control the direction of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so that person that's what executive president is.
Would you use a different term to describe what you're describing, or is your objection to the concept of the fact that you need that in order to be able to move in certain organizations? I'm curious on your objection.
I think I don't think it gives you any detail on when I say you don't have executive presence, you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Everyone says, what does that mean? I don't have executive presence. Like you need to give people context to kind of what that means into the, and it's just your story, but it's also like, people don't want to tell you, but like, it's the physical stuff too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how you dress. And I'm not saying you have to dress to match everyone else, but you have to dress for the audience.
Sure.
Like you can still be your individual self, but you have to dress because people are people. They have biases. They'll judge you as soon as they see you, regardless of how articulate, how clearly your storyline is. They'll say, oh, well, he can't, like they'll just block it out. And so you have to understand like, who am I presenting to? And so when I go to present, when I do a presentation, I'm like, okay, what's the dress code? Am I suited? Am I not suited? Am I wearing a jacket? Is everyone wearing a jacket?
Mm-hmm.
Are you wearing a tie? Are we not wearing ties? What are we doing? Very important because I know that will be the first thing they see of me before I open.
You've been to numerous organizations throughout your career. I'm curious if you've had to adjust your leadership style from one organization to the other, or has it been largely transferable, or did the cultural differences within these organizations present a challenge?
You had to adjust your leadership style at every organization I've been to, because the culture is different within each organization. The culture is different in each organization. Some organizations are extremely direct, extremely transparent. And you can be that, right? You can be extremely direct and extremely transparent. That works well for me.
Yeah.
There's some organizations that are more passive aggressive, right? And you have to be, passive and not as direct as you normally would be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some organizations who you are, and you got me looking back over my place. You got some organizations who you have to slow walk them through the story, right? They're not passive aggressive, they're not direct, but they need to be walked to the story. You have to spend a lot of time on the why and educating them. But you have to understand that about the organization. You have to understand how people move. And so whenever I join an organization, I try to spend time listening to see how people work, understand, okay, who does things really well, who delivers things really well, and how can I adapt my style, not change myself, adapt my style to fit that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to say, do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
Be honest with you. Like at some point in your career, you get to, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not what I want to do. Like I worked at one organization. I was like, oh, I'm not, like it just, it's not on my list. It's not on my list place I work. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. Like, this isn't working for me. Like this is too much to be this person.
Mm-hmm.
I have to literally not be who I am.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not doing it.
We're running up on time, but before we jump, I wanted to ask you about teams and building teams, right? You as a leader, you can be highly effective as an individual, but at the end of the day, when you are, VP, SVP and up, generally you have moderately to large size teams that are executing on your behalf. How do you ensure that you are building high performing teams and creating the right incentives for them to work hard on your behalf?
I'm a firm believer that most of your time should be spent with your team and helping them understand the why of what we're doing. If it's building a house, why are we building the house in this location? Why are we using this type of stone? What other suggestions would they have?
Yeah.
Solicit them for feedback. Make sure they feel like they are a important part in the why, in the discussion on how we go about executing, and then empower them to come up with recommendations and listen to their recommendations.
Yeah.
Because a lot of leaders don't. And what does that create? Like you become almost like this dictator and people start to do what Troy wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want a team of people doing what Troy wants to do. I want a team that's doing what's the best for the customer and the best for the company. And the only way that comes to life if we all sit around and we understand the why and there's a different objective. I'll give you a real life example. Like on my current team now, I have a very junior person outside the country, and we were working on this objective. And the why was like, we want to reduce this expense line. And I want to tell you, John, we turned upside down on how to reduce. And then the other day, like, what if we do this? I was like, run the numbers. What's that look like? Oh, that works.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Oh, no, that works. But like, if I came in and says, I want to reduce it by X, Y, Z, he would have never felt comfortable running that number or that idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, run that number and then get with legal to see if I can really do X.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see how we can make that come to life. Let's take that. But not only do we take that, like set it up, but to a fault, I will ensure that that person is in the room presenting that. Because I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, well, why aren't you presenting it? I was like, well, he did the work. Like, I want him to present it. And I want him to get credit, because that's the only way he's going to continue to deliver for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't celebrate his success and give him opportunities to present. So I will coach him on presenting, coach him on how to style the deck. But I want to set it up and I'll let him present. And where I think that when it goes south, my job is to help.
Yeah.
Derail him, get him back. But I'm building up the next leader.
Yep.
I'm building up, my goal is to build the next leader.
Yeah. And if he does well, I mean, it makes you look good as well.
It makes the team look good.
Yeah.
If he does well. And that's a risk I'll take. I'll take it every day. I'll do that risk every day for the team. Because I see some people come in and they want to be the voice all the time. Now, sometimes you have to be the voice, but they want to be the voice all the time. And they don't, they put all this pressure on their teams to deliver the stuff. And then you take it and they don't understand what they're doing. And eventually they stop giving you new ideas.
Yeah.
They stop giving you new ideas. And they're like, okay, what do you want me to do? What do you want to do? And you just eroded all the benefit of having such a diverse team.
Yeah, it makes sense. Any last words of wisdom you want to leave our audience?
It's a marathon and not a sprint. And I would say, take your time, understanding who you want to be very diligent, write things down. Don't box yourself into what you perceive the next step. Allow the learnings cycle to happen.
Yeah.
And evolve, and allow yourself to evolve in your roles, and allow your personal fulfillment to overlap with your professional fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.